Call this meeting to order. First, we need to review the minutes on page 2 and 3 of your packet. Does anyone have any comments or changes? We would entertain a motion.
I move to accept the minutes.
Thank you, Frank. A second?
Second.
Second from Drew. All in favor? I should have said any further discussion, but I didn't think there was going to be any. Minutes are approved. Item 3 says public hearing, but I don't believe there is any.
No, we found that with a little further research that no public hearings were required for any of the building permits that we had pending. There were 3.
So why don't you just go ahead and brief us on item 4?
Okay.
Status of things.
So as I mentioned, we had 3 pending permits, one use permit and 2 building permits. It was found out after we scheduled our public hearing that the use permit for Damian Langell on 5 Bennett Drive, we were thinking that we would have to consider doing something more than just a straight permit because of the way it was zoned. Now, in the official zoning map that we were using, the one that's available online, due to street names and other lines that clouded the map, we couldn't tell what land use that was. We assumed it to be commercial, but you couldn't tell, and so it might have been residential. So what we went back and we researched it. I went into the GIS program and I stripped away all the stuff that we didn't need to see, and lo and behold, that one lot on the end of Bennett Drive on that side of the road, the Pashate parcel, was commercial. So it's a commercial use and a commercial lot. So it was deemed that the CEO could sign off on that permit, which we did. Mr. Langell was in the other day. We took care of it. I told him let us know when time gets close and we'll have a ribbon cutting for him.
Sure.
The other 2 permits were building permits that were pending for 271 Fort Fairfield Road, so the communication towers on the hill. Basically, and I was telling a story before we started this evening, that as I was researching that in the code book, I found the appropriate section and read down, about 3/4 of the page down, and there was a paragraph I read. It sounded like it needed to come to planning board. Lo and behold, even though the page ended there, 3/4 of the way down the page, it continued on the following page, and I didn't catch it. Actually, the manager did catch it, and he let me know that, and we were able to contact United Cellular and sign off on those building permits, and they're pending 1 fee payment or underway.
Good to go.
That's been resolved.
That's the kind of news I like to hear. Let's work for us. Well, sir, what's next?
Well, New Communications says we have an interest in a possible very large solar array. It's certainly very large for this part of the world. The permit has not been delivered yet. Oddly enough, the fee for the permit has been delivered and is sitting on my desk. But I talked to one of the principals today. He said there's a couple little details on the permit he wanted to fill in first, and I just let him know that we didn't want to be the holdup. So if he's fine with his accounting and doesn't have to account for the check that's been sitting there for a month, just send the permit in when he's ready, and we'll work with him.
I'm very anxious to learn more about that.
Yeah. It's going to be about 25 acres.
Aha, it is big.
Spoke to him today. We did another building permit for Troy Haney over to Haney's Building Solutions, and if you go by, you'll see that he's already started building a showroom for his
Foundation forms are in.
For his line of feed and seed.
Oh.
So that's underway, and I even saw it on the internet. Various other fits and starts. We've been doing a lot of work, and that would go under staff reports if you want me to move on.
Yeah, please do.
So we've been working a lot on the Blight Initiative. We've met several times now. We're getting to the point where we have a list of tools to use. And realizing we might catch up some people that we really didn't want to catch up in this whole thing. We actually have a list of services that would help people. If they, for instance, if someone's aging in place and their house is a little shabby, it's not really the person that we want to catch. You know, they're not the bad guys really. They've paid their taxes all these years, and they just need a little help. So we did find all the services available, and we can direct them to the proper service, and even make the phone call for them if that's what it takes. So if they need a front railing fixed or some paint or something like that, we can direct them to the right resource. So, more research on Blight Initiative, and I found just today, I was talking to the city manager, I guess the city manager now in Sanford, on how they implemented their land bank, which is part of our Blight Initiative. Basically, they hired a person that's been working in the southern part of Maine. He worked in Portland. He's worked along the coast quite a bit. He's the one that's literally writing the book about this land banking technique. They hired him to help set up the land bank in their community. Since then they've acquired 80 properties. They've demolished 25.
Wow.
It's been very useful to them. Part of the trick to this is the way they set theirs up. So we do all our due diligence. The code enforcement officer goes out and does his inspections, create a report, pictorial evidence and all this, and then it comes back to a hearing. Theirs is set so that city council actually conducts the hearing. So there would be some training on the council side. The council would take training, or a counselor would take training, because there has to be a certain level of judicial prudence, because it carries the same weight as a district court. The issue has been is all these are civil matters, and when you send these to court, they'll sit there for months, because the court system is just so jammed up with cases that these more minor, in their mind, civil cases don't take precedence over a lot of other cases. So it's very interesting. Still learning. I've been given the contact name for this fellow that created their land bank, and we'll follow up with that tomorrow.
How big is Sanford compared to Caribou? I don't know a lot about that place.
It's comparable.
Yeah.
They're actually expanding rapidly. They're the newest city in the state.
Are they
I don't know how many
near Portland
population.
or Bangor or what?
Southwest of Portland.
Right.
It's like
Oh.
45 minutes from Portland,
Okay.
but more
New
towards
Hampshire border.
the New Hampshire
Yeah,
border.
yeah.
Okay.
Like you get off the highway and you've got to drive 30 minutes
So
from the
they're-
95 over.
They're probably growing like a week.
They are.
Yeah.
They
And housing is a very big concern there.
They have a new technical school, brand new
Right.
school.
Right, and so an old mill town, basically.
Yeah.
And what happened is when the mills went away, all these grand old houses that were converted over to apartments to house these mill workers were empty. And so a lot of these buildings went to disrepair. And they had, as we do, where we have the onesies and twosies salted throughout the whole community, they had that, but as well as neighborhoods. So they've really gone in, and he said it's amazing. I was speaking to Steve Buck, he's the city manager down there. He said it's amazing if you clean up a couple buildings in a neighborhood, the whole neighborhood responds and it thrives and comes back to life because other people see the effort and they put the effort into their building. So the community has responded to this. I think there's been some hiccups because now, in order to implement their land bank, they seeded it with $250,000, $250,000 to start, and the fees they pay for registering all these apartments and rentals, we talked about that earlier, goes back into the land bank, and they use that to hold or acquire or sell land.
Sounds
So
interesting.
some of these fees are pretty extensive. I haven't had that conversation yet. So we'll see where it goes from there, but I'll learn more tomorrow. And Benny Thompson and myself are going to be out and about. We'll be in your neighborhood, we'll be in everyone's neighborhood, doing our blight survey.
I got so much snow, you can't see my house anyways.
Well, that's the issue. We kind of wanted to wait until the snow melted away a little bit, but really it is coming to a head and we need to have it done. So we can at least do a visual inspection of the buildings and outbuildings. What's on the ground, well, we can't see that till spring. But usually the building is an indicator of how the grounds are as well. So if they're not keeping up their building, they most likely aren't keeping up their property either. So that's to come. We inserted the Good to Knows, which is a new initiative here in the city. So basically what's going on, department by department. I kind of thought this was going to be sort of a pain to do every week on a Friday to start out with this, but it really makes you sit down and think about what you accomplished during the week. So I've kind of come to enjoy that. You know, you're out there spinning plates and trying to get everything done, and you stop and think, what did I get done? And so I think this helps with that, and it helps other
great.
people know what we're up to. Good reading for some time. We also included the council priorities list that they've been working on. So the city, in the scope of our work, we touch a lot of different projects. So something that was rated very high on a priority scale is a priority, and we'll be working hard on that. But the ones that didn't rate so high, that work still needs to be done too. So it's not like it's not going to get done. It just doesn't carry the weight of some of the other projects.
I'm gonna have to take the time to read that.
Yeah,
That over, that's interesting.
it's hard to read on my phone.
Yeah.
Thank you for printing that out.
That looks like, it's a very interesting tool though, and I've never seen it before. I like that.
And so I guess that's all I had for our staff report. Like I said, we'll be out in your neighborhood. If you see us, wave.
So you're doing a survey, is it all a visual, or do you talk with?
It's all visual. If we stop and someone invites us in, well, that's a different thing altogether. But typically, we'll just do a windshield survey.
And you have a format of
Yes.
questions and
We-
things you're looking for?
What we're looking for, there are five categories that we're scoring on, so it'll be a weighted type average. There was, so visual score of the building, the main building, visual score of the outbuildings in the area, whether or not there's services, so utilities. Current land use, and if it's the desired land use for the zone. So we'll grade them. We're using some brand-new homes as kind of like the control for the top part, and some of the houses that we're already have listed to be condemned would be our comparison for the bottom part. So it's a little bit subjective, but I think once we get rolling,
Well, it perforce, I think, needs to be a bit subjective, but.
well, it'll be subjective, but it'll be two of us doing it, so it should be, reasonably
It's based on some criteria.
right.
Yeah.
That's why we wanted to identify, okay, this is Frank's brand new house. So this is in pretty good shape, visually, it's in the right zone. It's It's got services, because we know that you have a store plan.
And
So,
when the snow melts, you gotta get rid of the shopping carts.
Anytime.
and on the other side, we've got some houses down on the end of Patton Street that are caving in, and they're abandoned and city acquired, and those would be at the very lower end. So,
So you're surveying all of the homes, or just identifying the blighted ones?
The whole thing.
Everything's getting a look.
It all has to be weighted. So there's, I think 4,600 properties in the city, but a lot of those are vacant farmland or fallow or wooded. So we don't, those will all be zeros and we won't have to worry about them. But, yeah, there's a lot of buildings when you start going down the street.
Sure.
So in the end, your report will rate them with a number, or they'll be blighted home or slightly
using a
blighted
number
home?
score.
Or are there categories of assessment?
More blightedness than others,
Yeah, I wondered if there's,
it'll be a percentage of a score. So the higher score is better and the lower score is worse. So will rank them.
I don't think they've got to the point of what.
We haven't got that far yet.
Yeah.
no, but-
But do you envision a cutoff point where some follow-up action will?
I think it will become apparent that anything lower than X amount is a blighted building, and they'll be receiving some sort of notice down the road.
Yeah. But that hasn't been established yet. You're going to wait and do the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the primary reasons for the tour of the survey is you also be able to identify areas that are at greater risk of blight, or you're seeing a more apparent reduction in the quality of the homes in the neighborhood, and then be able to look at those neighborhoods and try to help jump on things ahead of time. One of the other criteria we looked at was, are the homes, or is the property, do we already have tax liens in place on it, for how many years? You know, that's also kind of an indicator of the potential for that home falling into decay due to the lack of interest in the property, or
Right.
lack of, and so that was another criteria we were looking at.
but in the end, you'll have a sense of the scope of the challenge.
Yes, we'll have a scope of the challenge.
How many?
And
10% of the homes in Caribou are.
we'll have a report, and
Yep.
we'll be able to report on, a percentages of the homes and how we're going to address the landowners. And I actually started on that a little bit, more like a fishing excursion for me. Instead of, when I'm following up on my notices of violation, I've been sending out a nicer letter that says right on it, it's not a notice of violation. But, the city's blight initiative for 2020 and what it means, and maybe some suggestions on how to take care of the issues in their property. So I didn't offer a sample of that, but I've sent out
Yeah, why don't
two of
you,
those to see what kind of reaction I'm getting.
why don't you share some of that with us next time, but you can redact the landowner's name, we don't need to know that right now.
Well, they've already received notices of violation, that's all public anyway.
Oh, okay. Sehr gut.
And we have to follow up with them. What we're seeing, and part of the issue we're seeing is that we're getting our notices of violations to where they need to go because we're worried about the safety of these buildings and the welfare of the families that live there and so forth. However, they're not being cured. So ultimately, the issue should be taken care of. And they should call us, contact the city, and we go and inspect it. And then we could release them from that notice of violation. That hasn't happened. We've got a property right here in the downtown area with 7 open violations, notices of violations over the years that have never been satisfied. So we gotta short circuit that cycle and
You
Drive to
gotta-
point
Yeah,
home.
you gotta find a way to squeeze the vice a little.
that's the idea.
Well, good. I like that Light Commission is doing some good stuff. comprehensive plan update, are we
I
ready for
want to give
that?
some kudos to Christine. and
Yeah?
Bob for showing up to,
Well, I didn't do much, I just showed up to see what was happening, but Christine's an active participant. That's great. Better you than me, Christine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever you say, Bob.
At least right now, I'm wrapped up to here with taxing issues. Okay, where do we go? Comprehensive plan update, what do we have for that?
okay, so where I left off with the comprehensive plan update, we were looking at future land use. So I put a copy of the existing future land use in your package. And you would find on the side, the edits I made. So these are Ken's edits, but this isn't the Ken document, so I wanted to make sure the planning board had a chance to look at that. I didn't add or subtract all that much to the text, but I did find a few things that I thought were concerning, and I wanted to run them by you.
Go for it.
So your edits are the red?
They're in red, yeah. So,
The yellow
so I had to track the changes.
What's the highlighted yellow?
The yellow, I wanted to ask an opinion, because in this
Is this the same?
future
one?
land use that we have, we were gonna combine both our residential districts into one
Okay.
residential district. So I wanted to kind of get the feeling of the board to see if we really needed to retain both.
Is this different from the?
Yes.
Yes, oh, do you want? do you
And I have an extra copy right here. I used to.
So the black and white version in the packet is the same thing.
Existing future land use. So the one that was sitting on the side that has the red,
Okay.
the edit tracking on.
Okay, this is the edited
Yeah.
by Ken.
Let's see here.
And this is current. Got it, thanks.
So things have changed over the course of time. So in the first paragraph, really, sort of our primary focus, we talk about growth and infill in commercial. So initially it said, however, will primarily be commercial. Now, I'd like to see some commercial infill too, but I thought that maybe that we could actually do a concentration on new and existing commercial applications as well as affordable housing residential development, both new and existing, taking advantage of the city's blight initiative, existing housing renovations. So introduce into our comprehensive plan, our everything plan, the concept of the blight initiative. I made additional additions later on in the same paragraph, because we mentioned the bird's eye site, but we now have an idea of what we'd like to see happen there. The manager working with high school students in planning for what could possibly happen there on this site once it's cleaned out. So initially they always thought that, oh yes, what we need is big box stores and things like that. But what we found that people really want is, yes, we need the big box stores, but we need specialty shops. We need affordable housing, and maybe some common areas for municipal parks. So I tried to give that flavor into the text as well. The rest of the changes I made were kind of minor, but I think they made a big impact. The second paragraph starts out, residential growth would be limited in the rural areas. And I thought that rather than trying to limit growth in the urban areas, that we should encourage that infill and growth in the urban area. I said that backwards. Instead of trying to limit growth in the rural area, we should encourage growth within the urban area.
Just a minor point, Ken, in that second paragraph. You change limited to encouraged, then you need to also change to in. And that happens in a few
In.
places.
Very good. And later on in that same paragraph, where currently several areas zoned residential exist that should be rezoned as rural, and I thought, well, rather than say that they should just be rural, we should look at the land use trends and see what they should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with that, too. Especially as things have changed in terms of where we are in terms of population growth.
Right, and some of this I was trying to kind of reverse engineer because we have a proposed zoning map out there, but we haven't done the proposed land use yet. Part of this will also be a land use survey. That was one of the reasons I wanted to wait till later in the season to do our light survey, because we could have done both at the same time.
I got you.
So we may still be able to do that to some degree while we're out this month.
Well, at least along the main drags. Once you get out into the rural hinterlands, you pretty much know what the land use is.
Right, right. And so I made that same comment about as required by land use trends, that we can decide what then needs to happen, and moved on to what was called the special development zone. I was not really, couldn't really tell exactly what they meant by special development zone, but I do know that in our proposed land use map, we have a mixed-use district that we'd like to use. So I changed it to that. Maybe that I was wrong in doing that. Minor changes. So again, and maybe Dennis could help us with that. That the idea of changing our two different residential districts into one district, is there an advantage to that?
Combining them together.
Yeah.
There's definitely pros and cons. I mean, you're going to have some areas of the city where neighborhoods are fairly uniform, and residents are going to want to keep their neighborhood uniform. Not going to allow a lot of extra development to occur around them that might perceptually detract from their neighborhood or what they are experiencing in the neighborhood. But at the same time, as some of the housing stock matures in the older areas, if you were to make everything completely uniform or applicable in all residential areas, you may not get the steering of development where you want it necessarily. And so I think it may be better to still keep at least two distinct residential areas, so that the one area becomes a little bit more of your incentivization zone. We want to see some redevelopment up here. These are more blighted areas. We want to see some changes occurring
Right,
here.
right.
And create a little more incentive to make some things happen in those areas.
And it also speaks to density of development as well as multifamily housing. And, you know, so anyway, I don't know where this concept came from, but I definitely wanted to run it by the planning board to see if, is that really what we want, how do we want to handle this?
We have one zone where multifamily housing is not encouraged and another where it's allowed, and yet, as I understand it, and yet where it was not encouraged, it still exists. So, well, we can still keep the two different residential zones. We might maybe change the allowed uses in those zones to some extent so that multifamily won't be an existing bad mark, so to speak.
And you bring up a good point, and that's one reason why we wanted to do the land use survey, so that.
We need to know what's happening, yeah.
What's actually on the ground,
Yep.
is our zoning consistent with what's on the ground?
Yep.
And if we need to modify the zoning boundaries or the permitted uses in certain areas, we can do that.
Yep. Yes.
Is your mic button up?
I never did do that. Shame on me.
Just noticed.
The whole town will give you a big demerit for the whole night.
So we've been silent the whole time?
All of us have.
Now you need to say everything all over again.
No,
Restart.
I'm sorry, Denise.
That's
I
okay.
totally forgot to do that.
I know Ken's mic picked it up because I can still hear you guys on the stereo system here, speaker system.
Okay, I didn't know we had one.
Yeah.
Very good. Any other thoughts regarding the residential district?
No, I like a lot of the stuff that's been added, and I read it over before tonight, and I was saying, well, now we're moving in the right direction, at least in my own opinion.
So in really the bulk of the other changes, I did remove some text. And again, it had to me, we're talking about limiting people, and that just has a negative connotation to me. Development in this zone should be limited to agricultural operations or industrial or residential operation that is of significant size to generate enough taxation to pay for required infrastructure. So I guess it has to do with large residential development in a rural area. So we're not really seeing those large developments because it takes so much land to be able to do utilities in a rural area. So I don't know if you really need to say we're going to limit these things. I just thought that was harsh language for. And also, larger country roads should be discontinued and small-scale residential development along many of these roads. Again,
Yeah, I looked
Be
at that and I
discouraged.
said, what are we talking about there?
Yeah.
We can't tell these people to undevelop the roads that we have. I think somewhere along the line, we need to find a way to if there are going to be developers to come in and develop a large tract, we need to find a way to work with them to make sure that what they're putting in utility-wise and so forth is amenable to what the city can service. I don't know how you do that. I don't think we just want to plop out some laissez-faire stuff and say, okay, everybody's encouraged to do everything because we still have that issue of if a great big development shows up way out there, how's it going to be serviced? We somehow need some language about developers needing to work with the boards to make sure that it's compatible with our long-range plan and our existing abilities. Did I make myself abundantly clear?
You did. I understood.
I don't know where I was reading this, but I read something to this effect that Caribou was developed with the population of 12,000 or so in mind, and now we're down to 8,000. So that might be a little bit of
I think that's probably an artifact.
a
of
buffer
of
for the
major-
development, yeah. So,
but that doesn't need to be a
So-
negative thing, because now we can infill
Right.
that to our old
That we do
footprint.
have,
We've got
yeah.
all that infrastructure that exists.
Yeah,
we can still use.
yeah.
Yeah, I think, well, a lot of the stuff that we have in writing was written. People envisioned
Mhm.
continued growth because of continuing things happening around us, and then it all came to an end
Yeah.
25 years ago.
Actually, we started seeing population decline in the 1960s.
Before my time, I can't speak to that.
We've lost population since the 1960 census.
As a county or just as a city?
As a city.
Really? Didn't know that.
And so the last things I really wanted some board input on is what is listed as constraints, including the 4 structures known as the downtown mall, which are less appropriate for retail development and architecturally are dated. I'm thinking the owners of these facilities probably don't think in those terms. They think they're part of the downtown area, you know.
Well, they would be if there's stuff that was in there would draw traffic. I mean, there's adequate parking. All the utilities are there. It's up to someone to decide how to use the square footage.
Right. There are plans on the books to actually return Sweden Street all the way through to the old 4-way intersection type thing.
Really?
That was discussed a while back. Oh, a while back. Probably 10 years ago. So the idea that these buildings have outused their usefulness and then they will drive the road back through the way it used to be, eliminate the whole one-way traffic deal, to pull people back into the downtown area. But
I think that whole loop thing is an impediment to all the goals of the downtown. I don't know why they ever put it in before my time, but I think if you did open that up and provided a boulevard, a flow, you would absolutely get more foot traffic down through
I don't
there.
know much enough about it. Can we actually do that and leave those buildings in place? I don't think so.
I would think it would be,
Alley is wide enough for
That's what I thought.
two-way traffic
no, I don't.
So
I don't think so, but it could be nicer
between the
for.
two
the
buildings.
people who own those
It
buildings
would be
are gonna
nicer
have
for
something to say
pedestrian
about
traffic.
it.
It could be a nicer place for pedestrian traffic. So to make our downtown more age-friendly, more pedestrian-friendly.
So we could probably write something more positive about that.
Yeah,
I got so used to the loop, it doesn't bother me a bit.
well, my thoughts on the looper is it was designed by the Department of Transportation. It likes to keep traffic moving. They don't like traffic to stop. They want traffic to move and disperse. So we would like people to stop and linger in the downtown area. That's,
Well, I still think if you give them a reason to stop and linger, they will.
I agree.
I used to stop at Radio Shack all the time.
Well, the last one was overtime, High Street and Bennett Drive could be added to the downtown district zoning in the future. And I think that we largely have already accomplished that with our downtown districts and TIF zones. So I don't know if we could eliminate that or maybe enhance that idea. Maybe people aren't aware that they are. I know that sometimes the people at South Main feel kind of left out of the downtown area. And a lot of our development now is happening on Bennett Drive, so I think we could rewrite that to reflect that.
Well, some of the impetus for, well, let's say somebody on South Main Street, well, South Main Street doesn't exist. Somebody on that section of Main Street wants to feel like they're part of the downtown, then maybe they need to do something about looking like part of the downtown too. It's, they could, I don't know what the real answer is, but they could do something to make people think of them as part of downtown. We can't move the mountain, the river's there, the stream, the Caribou Stream is there, the bridge is there. And that seems to be like a natural divider. I don't know how you change that, but people's self-perception sometimes drives the rest of the
Right, it could be a
perception.
self-perception. So to get past the self-perception, we define them as being in the downtown, or we recognize them as being part of the downtown.
How far out are we talking? Like the Bulliers and beyond, or?
No, I don't think so.
Probably as far as Russ Street, in my mind. Northeast Propane's beyond that, and RW Wed's beyond that, and County Electric. Micho and Micho Trucking, I don't think belongs in the downtown. So.
Yeah, that's more of a, just a flat out perception issue than it is anything else.
We'll see if we can draft up something that can recognize that those portions of town that maybe are recognized as a downtown. We still have our village square proper, but the downtown used to be Water Street.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You know, so it's evolved over time.
I would think downtown would probably pretty much stop right at Sunoco. Once you start heading sort of out of town, you know, probably where the Bird's Eye Avenue and everything was, from there back this way.
Yeah.
I would think that would be more
Yeah, that'd be
downtown.
a
You
good
start
place to
heading
put a sign that
south.
says, "Welcome to downtown Caribou."
Once you start heading further south,
That's not downtown anymore.
You
I
have
agree.
you have those two buildings, you have where H&R Block is and then where Felch Company is, those two buildings. That could still be considered downtown. But yeah, having it near where the Bird's Eye is.
But
That's not.
we still have that issue on South Main, the same issue we have on Sweden Street and North Main, is we have commercial, residential, commercial, residential. It's the whole mixed use thing, and I think
That's not gonna
I think that
change.
we're on that, and that we can, when we look at our, again, reverse engineering from our proposed zoning map and try to get the land use part out of it. Those uses are traditional. It's always been a mix of commercial and residential. So where do you draw the line?
I'm not sure you do.
What's the purpose of drawing a line?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
What good does
you know,
it do to
what's
draw a
the purpose
circle?
So our prescribed downtown district and our TIF district would be the reason.
Yeah, but you don't want to draw a big circle around something and say, okay, all you people who live in here, you really shouldn't be. You know, you don't want to do that. People that have homes,
Well, right.
and some of them are downtown.
I mean, if you're downtown, there's potential for a tax incentive.
Correct.
But, our tax increment finance districts cover now all of the downtown, as well as Bennett Drive and a lot of South Main Street. So the tax incentive is really not a differentiating point.
It's broader than all of that, wherever you draw the line.
It's, usually when you're looking at zoning regulations and you're trying to make distinctions, it's because you want to create a difference as far as the regulation. You know, you might say in the downtown area, we really want to start to see housing above stores. And you write the regulations such that you incentivize the development of that in the downtown or the old Sweden Street area, so to speak. Your other areas may be more auto-oriented, and so your regulations may be, your parking regulations might be more another requirement. You're gonna have more parking there because you've got more auto traffic, but maybe you have less parking requirements in the downtown because it's more pedestrian friendly. And you want to not occupy your downtown with a bunch of parking lots, you want more storefronts. So, but again, it comes down to what kind of development are you trying to see happen in this particular area? And do you want to draft your regulations differently? As far as drawing the boundary of this is our downtown, this is our other areas. Right now, from the tax point, it's really no different. From a commercial standpoint, there's really not much different. There's not a lot of distinction between our land uses and the zoning boundaries that we have. But I know the planning board, you've looked at the land use plan, and there have been some distinctions made as we move forward with getting this revised.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in my mind anyway, even if we had an area in the downtown where we encouraged second-story residential development, that doesn't obviate the need for parking for those residents, because this is not New York City where you can live without a car. If you live in Caribou, you need a car. So we got to be careful. I mean, we had issues 4 or 5 years ago where someone was developing apartments and there was no places, no legal places for them to park the cars.
That wasn't long ago.
We need to address that too.
So I'll try to draft up something that sounds reasonable about the description of those areas. It'll come to me at 3 o'clock in the morning someday.
Good.
Yeah. So is that, I know you talked about mixed use in the past, a mixed use zone, is that what the
So,
reverse engineering?
We had an interface on all our major thoroughfares where we have a mixture, we have a concentration of commercial and then a mixture of residential and commercial
Mhm.
and like that until we get back out into the pure residential areas.
And so had you talked about something like that?
We've looked at the mixed
The
zone,
chapter.
the mixed use zone, it's on our proposed land use map. And I was trying to reverse engineer that into our land use.
Yeah.
So as we defined our land use, we kind of talk about this over time. For instance, they sold Dr. Donahue's house. Well, so that's a grand house right here on High Street. It's always been residential. While on either side of it, it's commercial type of thing. So now we have Mahoney's Real Estate. They're selling their building. They're retiring. So another grand old house,
It's being
Victorian
marketed
house.
as a grand old house too.
Right. So again, you got the bank on one side, and you've got the Mahoney's, and then you've got Dr. Donahue's house, and so. But we see that on all our major thoroughfares. So that's a land use trend that we've identified, I think, and to bring that mixed use into those areas, I think makes a lot of sense.
I agree. Just have to write it up so that it doesn't discourage people, make them feel
Well,
left out or inferior.
it shouldn't, because really, it's a good thing to have a pedestrian-friendly neighborhood. For instance, you can walk from Dr. Donahue's house to the grocery store and get groceries, or down to the library or your local bank. Right around, the children go to school right around the corner. There's nothing wrong with that. Matter of fact, that's nice. That's kind of a Norman Rockwell type village, right? So.
Help me out. What building is Dr. Donahue's house?
Well, as you go down the road, you have the Key Bank, and then you have Mahoney Real Estate. Right next to Mahoney Real Estate was Dr. Donahue's. I refer to it as Dr. Donahue's house because
Okay.
it's like having a tree on the corner that's been going for 100 years. It's a stump now. But we have those same examples as we move up Sweden Street.
Oh, sure.
So when you get past the courthouse, and you have the housing complex, so Caribou Gardens, and then you have some multifamily housing, and then it moves back into a commercial type application sometime after that.
On one side.
Both sides of the
Residents on
road.
the other side, yeah.
So it makes sense we plan for that kind of development.
Agreed. Where are we now?
I think that really, I didn't see anything I would change in commercial or industrial districts. We've actually combined our industrial districts into one zone now. So I really didn't see any changes I'd make there as far as an update to our comprehensive plan. Unless you see something that I'm not seeing.
Not yet. We are at item 8, Chapter 13, City Manager Notes.
If you haven't gone to sleep yet, you might.
That's not the best intro I ever heard.
I know, right?
Not a very good comment on the staff either.
This is not exactly a basketball game either.
Yeah, it's definitely not a basketball game. Because we've got some new members to the board, let me provide a little bit of background to where we're at right now with this.
Can I share what's wrong with you, Sharon? You've got Dennis's notes? Yep.
So the board's been going through, focusing on the land use element, looking at what uses are permitted in the land use matrix. That matrix has certain zones and a whole bunch of list of uses and whether they're permitted in those zones or not. If there's new zones that are desired to be created. And then there's also the elements of the plan, or the document itself, all the narrative that helps to actually implement the zones and the new development regulations. And what you're looking at right here, as we were going through Title 13, one of the things we found was that some of these regulations, they have a scattering of different things, different review types or processes scattered throughout the document. There's really not a good uniformity or consolidation of things, making it real easy to find all the pertinent regulations and a need for some better organization. So as you look at the zoning ordinance, if we were to break it down to general requirements, administrative things, general application, authorizations, powers, duties, there's site design requirements. If a new development happens, these are specific requirements that have to be applied to the site review process. We have subdivision review processes, things that apply to how a subdivision is designed, the road layout, the lots, and whatnot. There were some specific use standards, so home occupations, a very specific use, and we have very specific standards for those, and they apply to wherever the home might be located, or kennels. Another one, telecommunications facilities, cell towers. We have nuisance regulations, general zoning standards and definitions of what the zones are, what the intent is for the zones, and we have specific building codes, like the main uniform building code. And what you're looking at with the different colors, if you were to start at Title 13 in the beginning and work to the end, you'll see that we have certain things in different places all the way throughout the code. And so this is what I'm talking about. Some of these things can be consolidated into areas, make it a little bit easier to find, so you don't have to jump from one section of the code to another to say, oh, where's that hidden regulation? Because we get that a lot from developers, is where'd that come from? Well, that's back in this section that you would never have thought to look at, you know.
And I imagine there's some inconsistencies too that you stumble upon.
Yes.
One part says
Oh,
one
yes.
thing and another part implies strongly something else.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so what I've been trying to do
It's hard to fix
is,
Yes.
without a full
and I,
rewrite.
some of you that have been here for a while have already seen this spreadsheet. I'll print this off so you can have it, so you can see. Basically, what we're trying to do now is take existing codes and try to bring them back together into these distinct categories and then organize the document, try to clean up inconsistencies, try to update based on current laws and Supreme Court actions and other things. And so what I've passed out to you tonight is the first 10 pages of this general section, okay? And so this pertains to the authority to have a zoning code, the planning board itself and your organization, the roles and responsibilities of the code enforcement officer, and there's a lot more to come.
Yes.
Some of these sections, as we get into them, will be more, let's just bring them together. There may not be a lot of text change, it's just
Just putting it in the right
putting
place,
it
yeah.
in the right spots.
Yep.
And so I do want to walk you through some of the more significant changes that are in the document right now. And I have gone further than 10 pages, but I'm just giving that to start to chew on. So in this document, if there's no red lines or strikeouts, that means that it's already in the code somewhere, and I haven't changed it. But it may not necessarily be, I mean, if you were to pull up the code today, as it is online, you may not see this text in this exact order.
Exactly, you won't find it in the same place, yeah.
Not necessarily, okay? But it's already in there somewhere, and I haven't changed it. I anticipate that when this finally comes back to you and the council for adoption, I'm not going to be showing a complete red line strikeout move draft. But that's what you're going to be looking at right now and through this process. But what eventually goes to the council will simply be here's our new code.
Clean document, yes,
Yep.
agreed.
Okay. So on the first page, this is all the purposes of having a code. There's really no changes there. The effective date, this is again just kind of cleaning things up. And we're trying to make sure we don't have to deal with out-of-date codes in the future. So the effective date, the city charter outlines the effective date for ordinances. And so instead of saying that the date of its adoption, we're just saying, because these things are going to change over time. Every time the code changes, the new ordinance is adopted. And so we're just going to simply reference the city charter as these things are effective based on how the charter outlines them being effective. Conflict with other laws, there's a lot of new language in here. Number 6, ordinances shall be interpreted at face value. That's a new thing. Basically, if it says what it says, and it's very understandable, that's how it's to be interpreted. Okay? Don't try to read extra things into it. Take it on face value. As far as conflicting ordinances, as was already mentioned tonight, the yellow line, that the most recently adopted provisions shall be utilized. So if you've got one place that said one thing and then you adopt something differently with a newer ordinance, ideally, when we are reviewing a new ordinance, we're cleaning all of this old stuff up. But in the event we're not able to, and there's a conflict, the new ordinance is going to supersede the previous to it. If the regulations were adopted at the same time, then the more restrictive, or that imposing a higher standard shall govern. Honestly, I have concerns about that. That's nice from the city standpoint, but normally, if an applicant comes in and you're trying to apply the law to their application, the courts generally say that you need to err in favor of the applicant. So, again, this is where we'll need to take a very close look at the regulations themselves and make sure what we have in place there. The last part, if a question should arise as to the interpretation of a regulation, such shall be referred to the planning board for consideration, who will then make a determination of intent and applicability, but shall not waive or modify the regulation without completing processes outlined for amendments in paragraph 20 below. So if there's something in there that, right, how does that really apply in this case? How do we make that work? The planning board, you can say, this was the intent, this is how we should interpret that and apply it in this case. We then would need to go through the document, obviously through meeting minutes, as the case. And if we need to make some text changes, we bring that back through the appropriate change process. Okay.
I like this so far. We're all putting it in one place.
Under number 9A, this just simply says that the planning board can initiate a change, the city council can initiate a change, and the individual can initiate a change. If we leave it at that, there's no need for a petition process. We just leave it open that anybody really can make a petition to change the code. We don't have to worry about petitions and gubernatorial elections and whatnot. So, and again, some of this is just trying to clean up processes and simplify things as well, trying to reduce bureaucracy.
Yes, stuff you have to.
Some of the other things. Also, one of the consistent things that you'll find as I go through this is whenever there's a reference to a fee, for instance, $90, I'm striking that because fees may change over time. The council has a fee schedule that gets set, and that changes as fees need to change. And so there will be references made to fees as set by the city council from time to time, wherever we have fee amounts in there. Okay. The processing for adoption of amendments. This is, again, trying to streamline some of these things, that if an amendment comes to you, that you only have to have one noticed public hearing. You can have more public hearings if you want as a planning board, but only the first public hearing has to be noticed to the public. The intent is that if we have to go through a noticing process for every hearing, it delays processes, it delays implementation, and it may not be necessary depending on the conflict that comes in.
So procedurally, we would just put it, if we were having a hearing and we determined that we needed to do more later, we'd just put it in recess until that time. Okay? Yeah.
You're striking for the last one needs to be 4. Down one more. Can't quite see it on the page. It goes 1, 2, 3, 3.
Okay, yeah, there will be some software training that we need to look at. One of the more significant changes to this section is that the city council would not be mandated to have a public hearing on the code amendment. Okay? So you as the planning board are tasked with the zoning ordinance. And you're also tasked with making sure we have public comment, public feedback, and that the community plan and goals are based on the input that we get from the public. The city council can still have a public hearing if they want, but if we don't mandate it in the ordinance, it also allows us again to move things through the process a little quickly if desired. And again, we're not trying to keep the public out of it. We're just saying that If there's some things that we think we can move forward on, let's not put additional steps in here that might hinder us from moving more quickly.
So I noticed you struck out the, and maybe I'm missing it somewhere. It said, C, the second C3, the amendment must be adopted by the council. But you struck out the criteria by which the council would adopt it. Is that intentionally left foggy, or are we anticipating a majority vote of
The
a quorum council?
So any ordinance, any amendment has to be done by ordinance. The charter outlines a process that the council has to go through to adopt an ordinance. And the council has to act in a majority in order to adopt the ordinance. So these provisions saying that a majority of the council, if the proposed amendment is recommended by the planning board, that's unnecessary, because whether it's recommended or not, the council can still adopt an ordinance. Okay. The last one, 2/3 majority vote of the city council if the proposed amendment is not recommended by the planning board. The city council, again, by a majority vote under charter, can adopt an ordinance. And so this, in a sense, is restricting the authority of the city council to act in accordance with the charter. And so that's why I recommend that that be taken out, because in a sense it's drawing authority away from the council that the charter gives them.
Thank you.
Makes good sense.
Back to, and I think I brought this up last time we talked about it, is it really in our best interest to charge a fee for somebody for, the only other entity that's going to come forward other than this council or the planning board is an individual or a company? Do we really want to charge them a fee if they bring forward
An amendment request?
an amendment request?
To
How
cover-
many do we really get, and what message are we sending by charging them a fee?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we get a whole lot of requests, but there is cost associated with the publication of notices for hearings.
We're going to cover the cost of the staff's time.
You're budgeted for that, right? The city's budgeted for that.
Well, we are, but at the same time, if somebody's coming in and they're asking for additional services than the rest of the community, it's a philosophical thing.
It is a philosophical
Should they then
thing.
be paying for the additional service that they're getting?
Yeah, see,
Plus
I don't
it's a-
look at it as an additional service. I see it as a service that they've been elected and are being, chartered and paid to do. So it's a philosophical thing. You might just consider just waiving the idea of a fee.
I think it indicates.
Sends the wrong
I think
message.
it indicates, though, a serious.
I want,
A serious request as opposed to just somebody. Then you don't know how many frivolous requests you're going to get. I want to change this
Well,
amendment.
that was my second.
I was going to change this
Yeah,
amendment. You
there
want to
should
have
be a
somebody
s-
that's coming in with a plan.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
somebody has to put up, shut up.
So-
It makes it, says a lot about how earnest they are.
Yeah, but a $10 fee isn't necessarily going to
Who said it's
discourage.
10?
Well, whatever it's going to be isn't necessarily going to discourage that if somebody's intent on causing problems
Well,
for the
I think
board.
it'll
But
make them think twice before they approach.
I don't think so. But
Well, we can
what I
deal
was
with
going
that
to
when it
follow up
happens.
with is, so if you did get away from a fee, or even if you didn't get away from a fee and the fee's low, is there a way that we can maybe screen those somehow before they show up in front of the planning board and really start taking a lot of our time?
I would say no.
Okay.
If they make application, then you have to
We're bound to-
consider the
want
application.
to consider it.
So in a sense, the fee is a way of saying how serious do you really want it.
It's just like-
a bunch of spurious requests.
It's just like site design review fees.
But it used
So-
to be, didn't they used to have to get 10% of the city's voting population? Didn't
That's
they used
what
to have
he's-
to petition?
They don't have to petition, but they could all petition.
But that's part we're
That's
striking
been
out.
struck.
Well, if you go back to
As a
that,
requirement.
that particular section, it says that a petition is an option for making application.
Right.
So it could be the planning board, the city council, an individual, or by petition.
So an individual could always do it without,
Without a petition. Right,
so why would anybody ever petition?
exactly. That's why I'm
That's why it's
striking
gone.
that provision out of there.
Yeah.
So to get back to Dan's question a little more, just a little bit more, would it be possible to say maybe a fee? Or the fee could be waived if it's in the best interest of the city?
Who
or
makes
something?
that decision, though?
Well, I think if you leave the wording as is, you can set it in the fee schedule.
Right, the council would set that.
You can set it to 0 if you want, and that way the wording,
But
but that's something I think the city ought to consider.
But if we're having a public hearing, everybody else that comes here before us for a public hearing pays $90.
Or,
Right.
now we
For
don't
putting
know
in
if it's
the,
90.
putting the
They're
notice
gonna-
in the paper.
They're gonna pay a fee set by the city council.
So
Yeah, that's for land
I
use.
think we should,
That's for
I think
land
we
use
should keep
stuff.
that. I think
Right.
we should keep it though, because that could be to me, if somebody wants to amend an ordinance, it actually takes more work than a site design review or something
Yeah,
of that sort.
That's fine.
And if I might kind of steer you back, the
Sure.
city council's obligation, their responsibility is to set fees. If they want to set the fee, they'll set the fee. If
Yeah.
not,
And that's my message.
And so-
Consider
yeah.
setting no fee
Right.
for this.
Yeah.
It's more citizen friendly, you know.
right. So to say it has to be, any application has to be accompanied by whatever fee is set by the city council.
The wording
Leave it at
fits.
that, and that's- Okay. All right, where did we get to? Planning board. So
We are.
didn't change a whole lot in here. One of the significant changes is under 2A, that rather than have a chair and a secretary of the planning board, we just have, that you'll now have a chair and a deputy chair, and the city staff will provide a secretary.
Okay. Can we still approve the minutes?
We would still approve the
Yeah,
minutes.
nudged out, if this ever gets, 15 years from now when they sign
Okay.
it, you'll be out of a job.
Some of this, again, is just, it's by practice, you're already doing it, that the chair can call a special meeting, but this, we're adding that in there specifically, so that it's, there's no question that the chair's authority to call a special meeting. Some of this is just cleaning up, again, requirements. The board shall keep record of all the documents and proceedings in accordance with the public record statutes. We have to handle documents and information according to the way the state tells us to do that, including types and periods for holding and withholding it. CEO or other designated city staff will be responsible for posting the agendas, distribution of notices, records management, other duties as may be necessary to fulfill your duties.
Go Ken. I said, go Ken. You got everything.
A quorum shall consist of at least 4 members. Quorum shall not include, there's issue, there's language in there about conflicts of interest and what conflict of interest is. Under votes, this is really where conflict of interest comes into play, that you as a board can vote somebody off the island, so to speak. If you think there's a conflict of interest and somebody doesn't, a majority vote of the board members, except for the person that is of concern, and I can tell them to think you have a conflict of interest and should not vote. And so, try to clarify some of that language in here.
Minor point, if we have 4 members present, we have a quorum, but if then one of those people is challenged, are 3 other votes sufficient?
No?
No. So we need more than the minimum quorum to get that job done. Okay, that's all right. Just wanted to
And
clarify.
any passage requires all 4 votes. Did I just read that?
Yes.
Oh. Interesting.
So you would have to
Yeah,
kind of
minimum of
declare
4.
your
It's gotta be 4%.
conflict ahead of time.
So should we have it in our agenda as a standard section, declaration of conflicts?
I would use the word potential conflicts of interest.
I've seen that in other boards,
Yeah.
beginning of every meeting.
That at one point. Potential conflicts of interest, right, when I first.
We had it on the city council, we don't have it in the planning board. But we could add that as an agenda, standard agenda item.
Wouldn't be a problem with me.
The paragraph B where you lined out the board should meet once a month, what was the rationale on that?
Because that mandates that you have to meet once a month. But as a board, there's up above that outlines that you're gonna set a
We
calendar.
can decide.
Set your own agenda, or your own calendar. Okay, very good.
So you may decide to take December off or
Right.
take July off.
Hasn't happened lately, but we could.
Right. But according to the ordinance the way it's adopted now,
Yeah.
you can't do it. You have to meet at some point every month.
Good thinking.
So I see communities in the southern part of the state are already saying they're not going to meet as a council for an extended period of time due to this new coronavirus issue.
That's an emergency measure.
So is it conceivable also that we'll be able to do FaceTime or Skype in to meetings? I mean, it's not really been allowed in the past.
Legislature
It's
doesn't
not
allow
allowed.
that. Legislature doesn't allow that.
It's a records keeping thing,
This around many times.
right? It's a records keeping thing primarily. Yeah.
But the state doesn't allow participation in meetings by electronic means. Some states are starting to do that, letting people participate via Skype or Zoom.
Yeah, maybe.
Then there would need to be ways for the public to opt into that, to be able to see it.
Too vulnerable, or I don't know. I'd like to
No, it's just
understand the
the-
rationale for that.
No, we haven't caught up with the times, that's
I
all.
was just gonna say, we're in the 21st century here.
An additional, response to your question, I'm striking that out under 4.1.
No, yes.
So this was a move in the link in the text, but I would still, this is again one of those things where it really should have been somewhere else in the body of the text. And so I moved it here, but I still would say we probably could strike that out.
Well, it's subtly differently. It's subtly different, though. You're saying that the planning board will be scheduled. One regular meeting of the board each month shall be scheduled. That doesn't mean you have to have it.
No, it says, it gives you a way of canceling it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that could stay. It's not. It doesn't contradict what you said earlier.
Right. So number 2 there, all meetings shall be open to the public. That's very definitive, but as a planning board, you do have the right to go into executive sessions. You very rarely do, but you have that ability, so adding the exception in there. Some of this was just redundancy. You don't need to say the quorum information again under this section, because you've already said it.
Mm-hmm.
All comments addressed, let's see, number 6. All matters shall be decided by a roll call vote. I don't know if you realize that, but right now, every time you vote on something, it has to be done by roll call. What that means is the chair will go down the line. Amanda, how do you vote? Frank, how do you vote? It's not a, everybody.
Right.
Right.
There you go.
So,
I think we should get rid of that.
yeah.
I mean, I came in here with planning board experience from the 70s and 80s in another state, and we never did that there. That
You'll
was,
see that where the seats or the participants are a little more political appointments
yeah.
were elected. and the public wants to know how did that person vote, so I can
Right.
deem them or bring them back on.
We were an elected board, and we didn't go through that. That's interesting.
So we're gonna have to do that, council, call the roll.
I don't think the council has that same provision. But as a planning board, you do.
It's the old do as I say and not as I do.
We can't do that, Dennis, come on, if we had.
No, I agree with
They do
striking
note it in the
6.
minutes, though, for the city council. They do note how each counselor
yes.
voted.
Yeah,
They don't do that with
No.
us. I don't.
But we
do
can.
it. Right. Well.
I was vested. I guess
Oh,
there's.
wait a minute, you got that struck out.
In the minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not trying to make
Yeah,
it work.
that's
So we're
what
not
he's
gonna
saying.
do the roll call.
No, he's saying under the current rules, we're supposed
Roll
to.
call, then you would.
But who
Oh,
knows?
oh, the current
But
rules.
who knows?
Gotcha, yeah.
Then that's okay.
Oh.
Number 7, this again is a
I'll make
significant change in that right now, it says all decisions must be based on whether the applicant has provided sufficient evidence to prove that all applicable law and ordinance requirements have been completed or complied with, sorry. That means that, well, the clarifying language there is that, or will be in accordance with established development review procedures. So somebody comes to you and you have to sign off on the site plan, but we know that there's still a building permit that's outstanding. Arguably, somebody would say, well, the planning board, you can't do anything until they've demonstrated full compliance with everything. But our review procedures
Let's just put conditions.
allows you to have conditions, and so that's what this sentence allows us to do, is say, that as long as they're meeting our review procedures, and they'll be able to show compliance through our review procedures, if that's sufficient.
So that phrase, or will be, is, what you mean by that is, or will be in compliance, in accordance with. I just tripped over that a little bit. Or will be in compliance, in accordance with. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Let me just, since I've got it on the screen, I'll make that change. There will be in compliance in accordance with. Special meetings, this again, I think is just a move within the text. Allowing you to call special meetings, agendas. Currently, we don't have public forum as a mandated part of your agendas, but I'm not sure if you have to, under state statute, have a public forum, but I would highly recommend there be a public forum as part of your agenda.
And what's the purpose of the public forum?
Public forum would be an opportunity for anybody that comes to be able to speak.
Other boards have that, like school boards have.
About
public
anything they
forum.
want.
Yeah,
Okay.
That they'd like you to address.
that's a good idea too. It's just something we've
I like it.
overlooked.
Yeah.
Are there guidelines on how the public forum is conducted?
Generally, public forums can be restricted in their duration. You can say we're going to have this for 10 minutes max.
10 minutes, all comments addressed
So
to
there's
the
no
chair.
written guidelines. The chair has the authority to set whatever parameters he or she would like.
Yeah.
Public, this is some good training for you right now. There's a
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
between a
yeah.
public forum and a public hearing.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
clearly.
So a public hearing is when you advertise to the public that they can come and speak to an issue. Public hearings should not be restricted in their duration. You should allow the public to speak to the issue as long as they want to. Of course, as a chair, you can say, let's not get repetitive, or if you've got the same thing to say that's already been said, please do. Call us every time, being able to make things work. But a public forum, you can say, this is only going to be 10 minutes long, 5 minutes long. We're only giving everybody 2 minutes to speak. If you wanted to say more than that, put it in writing, give it to us, or talk to us about a future agenda item.
Now, what would be considered, proper item to be talked about in public forum for the planning board? Like, what comes to mind is the stop sign on Collins Street. would that be something that would come to the planning board or would have to go to the council? And how
We
would
have-
city staff direct either one?
Planning board has nothing to say about stop signs.
But I know it doesn't, Bob, but I'm saying there's certain things that you guys can say, okay, this is a planning board level public forum versus a council level public forum, and try to direct people into that, because it'll do a few things. It'll save time on either your end, or save time on our end, and they can be brought to the appropriate
Well,
people.
we don't, generally, I don't think if you have time set aside at the planning board meeting for public forum, you don't have people submitting their forum ideas ahead of time. We're not gonna be filtering them. So if something comes up and the chair or members decide, hey, this isn't really in our purview, that's when we can say, okay, take that to
Yeah.
whatever.
But what I'm saying is a preemptive measure, if somebody comes in and talks to you, you say, listen, if you want to bring it up in public forum, this is how you do it, and the rest is city staff. I am fully aware that anybody can walk through that door and sit right there at that microphone and go through it every second Monday.
Yeah.
But, and I get that, you're gonna have that. But my only issue is making sure city staff is fully aware of which area to go for public forum. Because everybody in the city of Caribou knows if you wanna go speak about something that you don't like in Caribou, you go to city council. They don't come here. But if it's a planning board issue and something you guys can solve at this level, then they're gonna have more of an easier time to get stuff done if they come here. And if it's a code enforcement deal,
But that's a presumption that they're gonna come to staff first.
it is a presumption.
They have a right to
What I'm-
come. they
However,
have-
what I'm saying is basically, if they do come to staff, just make sure everybody knows this is where we need to go. That's all, just to streamline the process a little bit. That's my only thing with public forum. Because a lot of time has been wasted in public forum, just with people talking about the same thing over and over.
Well, that's a given. Once you have a public forum, you're gonna have a certain amount of time wasted. We just have to schedule it.
It may just be that you have a public hearing, or you had a public hearing on something before, and it's back on your agenda again, and somebody wants an opportunity to speak to the issue again. And the public hearing's not on there, but you say the public forum is reserved. We don't have any public hearings tonight, but does anybody want to speak in a public forum on any of the issues that are?
But you can change you can change the format for a public forum. For example, if we showed up and there was 20 people here that all wanted to talk, then the chairman could say, okay, everyone's got 2 minutes, right? I mean, it's nothing that's set in writing.
No, yeah, that's
for
right.
the whole
That's right.
streamline of the deal, right?
Right.
And that is their only shot as well. Once we are after the public forum, that's it.
Then we're gonna go back to our agenda.
Yeah.
We don't have to make a decision based on they came and talked.
Right.
Apparently, we're supposed to mail your packets to you for every meeting under the current code.
Well, it depends on how you define mail.
Yeah.
Email?
So, just, again, single word change. has to
Yeah.
be delivered
Yeah.
to you before the meeting.
Good with that. Tells you how long ago these things were written.
The CEO shall determine whether the application is complete before placing the request on the agenda. So this is a significant process change. That right now, the planning board, you are supposed to make a determination if an application is complete. So in a sense, we have to bring all the applications to you, you decide if it's complete, and then it enables us to move forward with.
Yeah, we've already pushed back on that concept.
Right. So this is saying that basically the city staff, when we receive an application, the CEO is going to check it, is it complete, before it even comes on one of your agendas. And that way we try to speed that process up.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really good. And unrelated, I noticed that there is not, for the agendas, there's not an opportunity for us as a body to accept or approve the agenda every week or every month that we do this. And I'm wondering if that is intended to happen when we get our read-ahead packages, or whether we should have something in our process right at the beginning of the meeting to say, here's the agenda, are there any comments, objections? Is the agenda approved? Aye.
That's probably a good, I've been in in organizations where that
Oh,
happens.
typically,
Yeah.
that's the first thing you look at. Is everybody okay with the agenda? Anything that we need to add or take out for whatever reason?
I think the chair needs a little discretion there, but
I think that's
Yeah.
been the practice, is that the chair, there's communication with the chair on setting the agenda ahead of time. But you're right, there's nothing in here that specifies who sets the agenda.
The agenda is proposed, and we just rifle through the agenda without, necessarily considering and approving it. Something to think about.
So then the first agenda item might be approval of the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Second item being the minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a problem with that.
I know with the council, it's set by the mayor,
Mhm.
the council elected mayor. So,
I don't expect that have to be a lot of modifications to the agenda, but it's as a courtesy saying, hey, what do you think? Nothing wrong with that. Easy for me to say, I don't know, 9 more meetings.
So would you rather see a draft agenda before we send the whole packet along, or?
You can run that by me. I don't see where I'm going to have a lot of input on it. But I don't mind allowing a minute or two at the beginning of the meeting for the board members to comment on the agenda. If somebody has a real objection to something, or more likely, we forgot to put something on.
Add something.
Or it could
Now,
be-
we got public notice issues there. I mean, if somebody wants to add a certain item that requires public notice, all we can do is say, okay, put it on next month's agenda and send the notice out. So we have to be a little careful how we modify the agenda.
Okay. Work sessions, just added this number 3, just to make sure it's very clear that no action can be taken during the work session. Executive sessions, that they have to be done in accordance with the Maine revised statutes. Now, this is one conflict as far as the voting procedures. That this does allow that if you have only 5 people here and 3 of the 5 vote to go into executive session, you can go into executive session. Everything else would require a vote of 4 members of the board. I don't know if that raises anybody's hackles.
Well, if a rule is a rule, and if we've only got 4 people present and that doesn't allow us to do an executive session, then we don't,
Right.
until we can. Yeah.
Well, it could be there's 5 and someone's got a conflict.
So at least
Can't vote on
three
going
fifths.
into executive session, and this would allow you to go into executive session to talk about this issue.
Yeah, you can go into session, but the voting has to be done in the public.
Right.
So you couldn't go to executive without 5?
That's what it
3
said.
of the 5.
3 or 5.
So
You gotta have at least 5 here.
Right.
So, 3 out of 5 of the board members present. Oh, it does say that, never mind, present and voting. Yep, that's all covered.
Present and voting for me. At least.
So if someone's conflicted, they're not voting.
I might suggest changing, instead of appearing as a fraction, spell it out, at least 3 out of 5 of the board members present and voting, because 3/5 could be misconstrued as 3/5 of the group.
And I think that probably was the intent, is 3/5.
Oh, really? Oh,
Because
well,
Ah.
that
I'm
would be
confused then.
Consistent with the 4-person voting
Mm.
requirement. The 3/5 is
So-
0.6 or 60%.
Oh,
So you would have to have 4.
so it is
I
3/5.
think it is the intent was
3/5.
3/5.
Oh,
At least. So at least 3/5 of the board
But we can
members.
have this only every 5 to make sure. that
So
there's-
however many we have, you'd have to have 60%.
rounded, rounded up,
Right.
or rounded
It kind
down.
of makes it
Right.
clunky.
We can just say, upon the vote of the board, and then we've already got the reference to the voting procedures of the vote, that you have to have 4.
Hmm.
Okay.
Well,
The hearing process, some of this is just clarification. You have to provide notice of a public hearing. Notices shall include, notices shall be given at least 7 days prior to the hearing. Who we get the notices to, notices shall be posted in 3 places and on the city's website. So the city's website is an addition to that. We're already doing it, but just modernizing the text. The board, striking the board shall give notice of the hearing to the city council. The owners of the property have owned the property or impacted upon it. If there's any concern about that, it's already, we're already putting it above that, but we'll be notifying of any other owners. Order of the public hearing, you'll invite interested parties. This again would be it's not a change in how we're doing it, but it's codifying it. This, you could say, if you want to speak during the public hearing, you have to put your name on the paper. And so what we would do is if there's a public hearing on the agenda, the secretary would have a separate sign-in sheet for the hearing. And then that would be delivered to the chair, and you'd be able to say, these are the people that have signed up to speak during the public hearing.
Okay.
I'm just going to jump down to 13-130, administration and enforcement. Again, some of this text is in there.
Hmm.
A lot of this is added text. This is trying to be a little more specific as to what powers and authority the CEO has, or the, in this case, community, the code enforcement department. So that we're now stating that they do have the ability, the city's giving the code enforcement officer the ability to walk on somebody's property to enforce an issue that might be coming up, to investigate an issue, issue permits, to resolve issues, to get search warrants, to withhold permits. There's 3 paragraphs that have been stricken. And that's because this was one of those times when those 3 paragraphs really belong in the section below, given the land use permits. So I take some of this language and make sure it goes down in the land use permit section. I do want, at some point, I will also clarify in the text what a land use permit is. Basically, as we look at land use permits, it could be a sign permit, a building permit, basically any permit that we issue that gives somebody an authorization to move forward with construction or changes on the property, we would consider a land use permit.
Certain buildings, if you want to call them that, such as small tool sheds and so forth, currently do not require a building permit.
Right.
So how do we work that language in? So, because here it says no building or structure.
They're 120 square feet.
It's 120 square feet.
And that changes also depending on the needs of the International Building Council.
Yeah, so how do we fix that?
So we could just say move until an applicable land use permit is issued by the CEO.
Until a what? Say that again?
But he won't be issuing a permit because the building is too small to need one.
An applicable land use permit. So if there's not a building permit that's applicable to that construction. We can play with the language. I understand what you're saying. We want to make sure that if it's required, you have to get it,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Those small sheds, would that still apply to tiny homes? Because we had a discussion about that. Did we
That'd be
make a decision?
I can't hear you.
Really
Tiny homes.
Tiny homes.
Those
Oh.
tiny homes.
Re-
Tiny homes are bigger, I think they're,
So we're talking about 700 square feet.
that's a lot bigger than
20 square feet's not a
120.
lot for a tiny home.
Right now, we're talking about, we're treating it like
Right, that
a,
doesn't-
like a mobile home, because the state hasn't given us any further guidance than that.
But the exemption under MUBEC or the National Building Code also pertains to the function of the space. If it's going to be a storage area, 120 square feet, you don't need a building permit. Technically, if you're going to be storing combustible fuels in there, it still needs a building permit. So that really comes down to how are you going to use it.
Every shed I know has a gas can.
Everybody starts
Guilty,
looking nervous
yeah.
here at the table.
Right.
No?
So, I mean, those are some of the little nuances of the building code.
Yeah.
That generally we just say if it's less than 120 square feet, you don't need one as a catch-all. But if there was really strict enforcement down to the letter, there could be some changes.
Just move the gas cans to my garage, which has a permit.
There you go.
Some of this text in here is, for instance, I'll look at them over, but basically the application permits shall be in accordance with city-provided application forms. The intent here is that we'll have separate forms, and on those forms, we'll outline all the information that is required to be submitted. By having those on the forms, you don't have to codify the forms and the language that would be on the forms. There might be things that come up over time that need to be added to the forms or additional information that we need. It's a lot easier to change a form than
Yep.
it is to go through a recodification process or amendment process.
Absolutely.
Smart.
So that's the intent here, of making it so that they have to use the forms that we provide to them. Also, the application shall not be reviewed unless accompanied by a fee set by the council. Again, the CEO shall issue that only if they find that it's going to comply with everything. This is a change here. Rather than saying permit shall expire annually on March 31st, if somebody got a permit March 1st, technically that would expire on March 31st. I don't think that's the intent, but this would now say that you have 12 months from the issuance of the permit to operate and to accomplish what you say you're going to accomplish.
The title of this.
Or at least gets make some progress.
For another, sorry.
No, go ahead.
For another 12 months?
So they have it for 12 months. We issue
Right,
it.
but then if there's a reissue, there's 12 more.
So if it gets reissued,
Yeah, it's 12, okay.
Will
Sorry.
we be treating building permits differently than use permits, land
No.
use permits?
then I guess that's.
Because you
what-
captured them all in this one section, but it's confusing to me as I read through.
And I think it may be easier for the public to understand if we call building permit a building permit.
Mm.
Right now, the text is set up to where a land use permit means.
It
any kind
encompasses
of-
building.
Right,
It encompasses a building.
right.
Yeah, see, I've never looked at it that way. Okay.
Well, sir, I want to thank you. This has been very
Making
edifying.
really, really good progress.
I really like the what direction it's going in, and I'm really surprised how much I didn't know about what I was supposed to be doing so far under the old ordinance.
There's a lot more to come.
Oh, yes.
Good.
My hope, I know that it's a major priority from the city council, as was passed out to you tonight. You'll see that The majority of the councilors had getting this Channel 13 division taken care of this year is a high priority.
Oh, yeah, I gotta go back and read that.
My hope is maybe the council will ease off on other projects. They want me to go work on Phil. But it is a priority for me too, because I know that I wanted to also tackle this. And so I'm incorporating changes that have been brought previously from the planning board, as well as doing some of these cleanup issues, modernization issues, and organizational aspects, try to get that into the document and get back to you as soon as we can. So every planning board meeting now, I intend is to have additional revisions for you.
Wonderful. Great. Really appreciate it.
Good work.
Okay. I thought this was going to be a short meeting because we had no hearings. Anyone else have anything to add?
I have one other thing to add.
Go ahead.
I meant to, under staff reports, and I'm only going to mention it because it's really planning boardish, it's kind of interesting. So I've been working with capstone kids at University of Maine. They're doing their graduate capstone project, and they're doing it with the Atlantic salmon people for a salmon hatchery on Lower Linden Street. So this is interesting because it lies both within the floodplain and the shoreline zoning area. But they own a building. So
I'm sorry,
they own a building.
Who's they? Oh, the Atlantic
Atlantic
Salmon
Salmon
people?
people.
Okay.
So they own the old Federation Fertilizer building, which is it's actually a blighted building. But it allows them a foothold because they've got the right to be able to occupy that footprint and add 20% to the size. Could house their fish hatchery in there. So the students are working on that concept and also a park feature along the river where their patrons can fly fish along the river. You know, kind of a cool concept, and it really kind of gives us a toehold on our concept of riverfront development.
Yes, indeed.
A little further south than we intended, but still. So they're asking things about trail access. They recognize that would be a good feature for both ATVs and snowmobiles. They're inquiring about steps to get down to the riverside. You know, what kind of procedures there would be there. So that it's an interesting project. It could be an international project because the Atlantic Salmon Federation, I think, will be involved due to the proximity of Tinker Dam and the fish going over the dam and all that.
Steps, and this is a side comment, but any steps that are built that better be able to withstand the spring ice out.
I've had the conversation that it really, in according to shoreline, that they'd probably have to be removable. They'd
Yeah.
have to move them.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's very interesting. Like I said, it's very planarish type stuff. It's kind of complex.
Are they going to get held up in their work with this new?
Well, I don't know how someone's going to
Closing
complete
things?
a capstone project via the internet.
Online, yeah.
There's a lot of hands-on type stuff
Yeah.
there. So,
Everything will be changed radically, I think, for a relatively short period of time. But some things that might have been done by June might have to wait for a while.
I think we're all waiting at this point. We just don't know what's going to happen.
yeah,
right.
the next shoe, the next boot to drop.
Okay, anyone has nothing further, I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned. And thank you all.